I will first call the Prime Minister to answer the engagements question, and then we'll call Kim Johnson. So, Prime Minister, your engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It will be 3 years tomorrow since a chemical weapon was deployed by Russian military intelligence on the streets of Salisbury. All our thoughts remain with those affected, their families and loved ones, and we will continue to seek justice for them. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure this House will want to pay tribute to the people of Salisbury and Amesbury and wish them well for the future. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Let's head to Kim Johnson. Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Liverpool is a welcoming city, the oldest Chinese community in Europe, but in 1946, the British government ordered the forced repatriation of thousands of Chinese seamen living in Liverpool with their British families back to China, causing lasting emotional trauma. Many of those descendants still live in my Liverpool Riverside constituency. Will the Prime Minister take steps to acknowledge these events and provide the descendants with a formal apology and for the justice they deserve? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, I have happy memories of my own visits to Liverpool, and I can tell her that we are certainly very grateful across the country to the Chinese community for their amazing contribution, and her message has been heard loud and clear.
Right, let's head to John Stevenson. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Pirelli factory in Carlisle employs around 800 people, contributes hundreds of millions of pounds to the local economy, and is an exporter. Its location is a consequence of regional economic policy from 50 years ago. Would the Prime Minister agree that if we are to rebalance the economy, level up the country, we need a modern-day proactive regional economic policy? And if he does agree, will he come to Carlisle to see the old and new in action?
Prime Minister.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for what he says, and he will hear more in just half an hour or so. Let's try and keep it to half an hour, Mr. Speaker, from the Chancellor about how exactly we intend to make sure we build back better across the whole of this country and unleash the tremendous potential of the whole of the United Kingdom, including, of course, Carlisle, which he so well represents.
The Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about the Salisbury atrocity? Does the Prime Minister agree with President Biden that the sale of arms that could be used in the war in Yemen should be suspended?
Mr. Speaker, ever since the tragic conflict in Yemen broke out, this country has scrupulously followed the consolidated guidance of which he will be well aware.
Keir Starmer.
The trouble is that whilst President Biden has suspended arms sales that could be used in Yemen, the UK hasn't. In fact, we sold £1.4 billion of arms to Saudi Arabia in 3 months last year, including bombs and missiles that could be used in Yemen. Given everything we know about the appalling humanitarian cost of this war, with innocent civilians caught between the Saudi coalition and the Houthi rebels, why does the Prime Minister think it's right to be selling these weapons?
Mr. Speaker, the UK is part of an international coalition following the UN resolutions, which he will know well, which are very clear that the legitimate government of Yemen was removed illegally. Those are the resolutions that we follow, and we continue scrupulously to follow the humanitarian guidance, which are amongst the toughest measures anywhere in the world in respect of all arms sales. He talks about humanitarian relief, Mr. Speaker, and actually I think the people of this country can be hugely proud of what we are doing to support the people of Yemen. Almost £1 billion of aid contributed in the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, he says the system's very robust in relation to arms sales. It can't be that robust. The government lost a court case just 2 years ago in relation to arms sales. The truth is the UK is increasingly isolated in selling arms to Saudi Arabia. Despite what's happening in Yemen, despite Saudi Arabia's human rights record, and the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, a murder the US has concluded was approved by the Saudi Crown Prince, So I have to ask, what will it take for the Prime Minister to suspend arms sales to Saudi Arabia?
Speaker, we could condemn the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. We continue to call for a full investigation into the causes of his death, and indeed we have already sanctioned 20 people, Mr. Speaker, in Saudi Arabia. And I repeat the point that I have made, that the UK government continues to follow the consolidated guidance, which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, was set up by the Labour Party.
Mr. Speaker, to make matters worse, the government decided this week to halve international aid to Yemen. Halve it. The UN has said that Yemen faces the worst famine the world has seen for decades. And the Secretary-General said on Monday that cutting aid would be, in his words, a death sentence for the people of Yemen. How on earth can the Prime Minister justify selling arms to Saudi Arabia and cutting aid to people starving in Yemen?
Mr. Speaker, it is under this government that we have increased aid spending to the highest proportion in the history of our country. And yes, it is true that current straitened circumstances, which I'm sure the people of this country understand, mean that temporarily we must reduce aid spending. But that does not obscure the fact, Mr. Speaker, that when it comes to our duty to the people of Yemen, we continue to step up to the plate. A contribution of £214 million for this financial year. There are very few other countries in the world, Mr. Speaker, that have such a record, that are setting such an example in spending and supporting the people of Yemen.
Keir Starmer.
This week, the government halved our international aid to Yemen. If this is what the Prime Minister thinks global Britain should look like, he should think again. And if he doesn't believe me, he doesn't like it from me, or the UN Secretary-General, he should listen to his own MPs. Just this morning, the Conservative MP for Bournemouth East said, cutting support to starving children is not what global Britain should be about. It undermines the very idea of the UK as a nation to be respected on the global stage. And the honourable member for Sutton Coldfield said this was unconscionable. Will the Prime Minister now do the right thing and reconsider this urgently?
Mr. Speaker, I repeat, we've given £1 billion since the conflict began. We're in support of UN resolutions. This year, we're contributing another £214 million to support the people of Yemen. There are very few other countries in the world, Mr. Speaker, that have that kind of record. I think in these tough, straitened circumstances, bearing in mind the immense cost of the COVID epidemic that has affected our country, I think the people of this country should be very, very proud of what we are doing.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, Britain should be a moral force for good in the world. But just as the US is stepping up, the UK is stepping back. If the Prime Minister and Chancellor are so determined to press ahead with their manifesto-breaking cuts to international aid, cutting the budget to 0.5%, they should at least put that to a vote in this House. Will he have the courage to do so?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are going to get on with our agenda of delivering for the people of this country and spending more than virtually any other country in the world. By the way, spending more still than virtually any other country in the G7 on aid. It's a record, I think, of which this country can be proud. Given the difficulties that this country faces, Mr. Speaker, I think that the people of this country will think that we've got our priorities right. He can't work out, Mr. Speaker, what his priorities are. 1 minute he's backing us on the roadmap. The next week he's turning his back on us. 1 week, well, he can't even address a question on the issues of the hour. He's going to have he could have asked anything about the coronavirus pandemic, Mr. Speaker. Instead, he's consecrated his questions entirely to the interests of the people of Yemen, Mr. Speaker. We are doing everything we can to support the people of Yemen, given the constraints that we face. We're getting on, Mr. Speaker, with a cautious but irreversible roadmap to freedom, which I hope that he will support. And very shortly, Mr. Speaker, you will be hearing a budget for recovery.
I think I already know most of it. Dr. Liam Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will be aware that when devolution was established in Scotland, there was no separate Scottish civil service created. We have a UK civil service with UK ministerial oversight. Given the turmoil in Scottish politics, will he then confirm that any civil servants who feel pressurised to behave inappropriately have a mechanism to seek redress beyond the ministers to whom they are immediately answerable?
Of course, thank my right honourable friend. Of course, we will support all civil servants. By the way, I thank them for their work up and down the country that they've done throughout the pandemic, and I think everybody in this House would agree that now is the time, really, for our civil service to focus on working together to build back together, rather than build back better together, rather than on measures that might divide our country, Mr. Speaker.
Now comes the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister on the terrible atrocity 3 years ago in the town of Salisbury? Mr. Speaker, the situation in Yemen has been called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. 100,000 people have been killed. 16.2 million are at risk of starvation. 2.3 million children, Prime Minister, are at death's door, facing acute malnutrition. The UK government's response isn't one of compassion. Instead, it is to impose cuts. That's what you're doing, Prime Minister. A 50% cut to international aid to Yemen, a move that the UN chief Antonio Guterres has described as a death sentence. Since the start of the war, the Tories have shamefully backed the Saudi regime through billions of pounds of arms sales and support, despite evidence of war crimes and of the targeting of civilians. Well, the Prime Minister confirmed that today's budget will force through the devastating cuts to international aid.
Speaker, I think anybody listening to this debate will have heard me say that this country, this government, in the last 5 years has given £1 billion to support the people of Yemen. I can tell him that on Monday, Mr. Speaker, in case he thinks there's any diminution of our efforts, on Monday we're going to provide cash support to 1.5 million of the most vulnerable Yemeni households, support 400 health clinics and treat 75,000 cases of severe malnutrition, Mr. Speaker. That is the continuing effort of the British people and the British government to help the people of Yemen.
In Blackford.
The reality, Mr. Speaker, is a 50% cut to Yemen aid at a time of a global pandemic. The coronavirus has hit poor and vulnerable countries the hardest, threatening decades of hard-won gains whilst exacerbating existing inequalities. During his leadership race, the Prime Minister made a commitment to stand by 0.7% for aid spending, a position he reaffirmed in June last year at that very dispatch box. What followed was yet another U-turn, another broken promise. Why is the Prime Minister breaking his own manifesto commitment? And why are his government breaking the promises they made to the world's poorest?
Mr. Speaker, I think most people in this country will know that the government has given £280 billion to support the people, the economy, the livelihoods, the businesses, up and down the whole of the United Kingdom. And that has, as you will hear from the Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, placed strains on our public finances. Meantime, we continue to do everything we possibly can to support the people of Yemen, including, by the way, through a massive vaccination programme to which the people of this country have contributed £548 million, the second biggest contributor in the world, Mr. Speaker.
Well,
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will know from his time working in the Black Country how important our green spaces and green belt are. Will he make sure that Dudley Council and our Mayor Andy Street have the powers and the resources they need to ensure development is on brownfield rather than valuable green spaces, and make sure that local people's voices are clearly heard and taken into account, including where the proposed development is across local authority borders, like in the surrounding Greenbelt to Dudley South?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we will protect our green belt, our vital green belt, and which constitutes, I think, 12.4% of our land. But we can build our homes, as my honourable friend rightly suggests, 300,000 of them on brownfield sites across the country.
Let's head to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Sir Geoffrey.
Mr. Speaker, we are now into the third month of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and we're fast approaching the end of the 3-month grace period. And the Prime Minister will be aware of the disruption that the protocol is causing to trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the damage it's doing to the stability of the political institutions established under the Belfast Agreement. What action does the Prime Minister intend to take to deliver on his promise that he would protect Northern Ireland's position within the UK internal market and provide us with unfettered access to goods from Great Britain?
Mr. Speaker, the position of Northern Ireland within the UK internal market is rock solid and guaranteed. We are making sure that we underscore that with some temporary operational easings in order to protect the market in some areas, such as food supplies, pending further discussions with the EU. And as I've said, I think to the right honourable gentleman and his colleagues, we leave nothing off the table in order to ensure that we get this right.
Mr. Speaker, our British vaccine finished in Wockhardt in Wrexham has shown the globe exactly what the UK can achieve. In Wrexham, we have the Myler Hospital, Coleg Cambria, Glendower University and an industrial estate bristling with SMEs. We're close to the Midlands and the North West. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that now is the time for our young people to look at careers and aspire to careers in STEM and healthcare, and Wrexham is the hub that can take us forward?
My honourable friend is completely right. I thank her, by the way, again for her amazing service in the NHS in Wrexham and her returning to the front line. And actually, it was in Wrexham at Wockhardt that I met young female scientists, Mr. Speaker, who are helping to make the vaccine that is not only going to free our country, we hope, from the captivity of COVID, but help to liberate the entire world. It was wonderful to see it happening in Wrexham. We want to see many more young female scientists growing up in that part of the world.
Let's head to Graham Morris. Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask about an important domestic issue. The system of property tax in England is broken. Council tax places an unfair burden on people living in the poorest communities without generating the revenues needed to fund local services. So does the Prime Minister agree that a proportional property tax, as proposed by the Fairer Share campaign, would create a transparent property taxation system, generate revenues local government needs, and ease the tax burden on hard-pressed families across the country, including in my constituency of Easington?
Mr. Speaker, with great respect to the honourable member, what the country needs are councillors that charge you less whilst delivering better services. And if you look across the country, you can see that it's overwhelmingly Conservative-run councils that do that, Mr. Speaker. The right honourable gentleman opposite last, Mr. Speaker, Westminster, they kept council taxes low. In Camden, where he lives, it's 3 times as high. That's the difference, Mr. Speaker.
Sir David Evans.
Last Friday, my constituent, Mr. Luke Belfield, who was aged just 18, was stabbed to death just a few miles from his family home. This has been horrendous for his family and his friends who've been left behind, and my heart goes out to them all. What more does my right honourable friend think that the police, society and Parliament can do to make sure that there never will in the future be such senseless murders again?
Mr. Speaker, I sympathise very much with Luke's family and his friends, and there's nothing I can say to alleviate their loss. But what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, is recruiting many more police officers to fight crime, rolling up the county lines, drugs, gangs, wherever we can, and setting out plans to keep serious sexual and violent offenders behind bars for longer. And I can tell the House that we've now got 6,620 of our target extra 20,000 police already recruited.
Patrick Grady.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the Prime Minister is the proud leader of a British nationalist party, and he says that his no to another independence referendum in Scotland is final. So why are his colleagues in Scotland distributing leaflets that say a vote for the Tories is a vote to stop an independence referendum? If a vote for the British nationalist Tories in Scotland must be accepted as a legitimate vote against a referendum, surely a vote for the SNP in May must be respected as a mandate for putting Scotland's future in Scotland's hands.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to hear a sort of acceptance there that he's running a nationalist party. If that's what he was saying, because I'm afraid I agree with that. They're not in respect of the whole of this country. But I think most people will think it extraordinary that they're talking about another referendum. The Labour Chief Whip is nodding quite rightly when actually what the people of this country want to see is us working together as one united kingdom without further constitutional upheaval to get through the pandemic and build back better.
Sarah Brittle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I firstly just say how great it was to welcome my right honourable friend to Accrington last week, and I'm sure the Prime Minister will join me in thanking both the staff and pupils at Accrington Academy for making our visit such a welcoming one. As you'll know, Mr. Speaker, my constituency was at the heart of the first industrial revolution, and we're ready to lead in the new green industrial revolution and level up once and for all. So on that note, will my right honourable friend commit to supporting my campaign to rejuvenate our high streets and town centres across Humber and Haslingden?
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate my honourable friend on her campaign. It was great to be in Accrington, and I hope that she'll be hearing even more shortly from my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, about what we can do to support the Towns Fund and other measures to help Accrington and places across the whole country, Mr. Speaker.
We're now heading up to Amy Callaghan. Oh no, I do welcome back again. Good to see you. Amy Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank you and members across the House, including the Prime Minister, for your well wishes during my illness. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had previously guaranteed there was no threat to the Erasmus scheme as a result of Brexit. We now know that charities such as Stand International in my constituency, who participate in the programme, are set to lose 96% of their funding as a result of the UK Government's decision to pull the plug on Erasmus+. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that charities will receive match funding under the new Turing scheme? And will he agree to meet with me and representatives from Stand International to ensure no young person in East Dunbartonshire gets left behind as a result of Brexit?
I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say how much I welcome the Honourable Lady back to PMQs. It's great to see her back, Mr. Speaker. And I do give her this assurance that I think the Turing scheme will be better and it will deliver exactly what she wants, because I think if there was a criticism of the Erasmus schemes, it tended to favour higher income households. We will do everything that we can with the Turing scheme to reach out to give opportunity to people from disadvantaged backgrounds. That is what we intend to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend has taken a strong personal interest in the tragic story of my constituent Harry Dunn. So can I ask him, will he please continue to do everything in his power to reassure Tim and Charlotte, Harry's parents, and all their family, that he will try to persuade President Biden to deliver justice for Harry?
I thank my right honourable friend, and she's completely right to continue to raise the case of Harry Dunn, and we sympathise deeply with his family. It's a case that we continue to raise at the highest level, and I know that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has only just raised it now with Tony Blinken, US Secretary of State.
Let's head to Beth Winter. Beth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rhondda Cynon-Taf, where my constituency of Cynarfalli is located, has the third highest COVID death rate in the UK, due mainly to inequality, poverty and chronic underfunding. This UK government has an appalling record on providing Wales with even a fair share of UK spending, let alone the funding needed to level up. 11 years of Tory austerity cuts destroyed the capacity of our public services to withstand the pandemic, and now he plans to bypass the democratic structures in Wales. My constituent Lyndon has a question for the Prime Minister. What will it take for him to stop ignoring the South Wales valleys?
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid I disagree profoundly with the with the implication of what she is saying, and indeed with what her constituent Linda is by implication asking, because this government continues to give massive support through the Barnett formula and elsewhere. I think through Barnett alone it's £2.4 billion, and there is now more coming, Mr. Speaker, through the Levelling Up Fund and other means. And it's thanks to the UK government that the furlough scheme has supported 3,400 jobs in her constituency alone, Mr. Speaker, and that is one of the advantages of the United Kingdom.
Let's go to Andrew Bowie. Andrew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Only this week, the government once again demonstrated its commitment to the energy industry, jobs in the northeast of Scotland as a whole, with over £30 million committed to creating a green energy transition zone and a global underwater hub. But would my right honourable friend therefore go further and support this most vital industry, vital to developing the energy technologies of the future, based, he will agree, in the greatest part of the country, transitioning to net zero with a long-awaited energy transition deal which will help transform the oil capital of Europe into the green energy centre of the world?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I really congratulate my honourable friend on his last-minute lobbying. He's only got a few minutes to wait before he may hear something to his advantage.
Let's go to Carla Lockhart. Carla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, in an interview with Sophie Ridge broadcast on the 8th of December 2019, you pledged there would be no checks on goods going from NI to GB or from GB to NI. While this has proven more challenging to deliver in practice, would you wish to take this opportunity to encourage ministers in Northern Ireland to do all they can?
Order. Unfortunately, I'm not responsible, and you is not something that we should be using.
My humble apologies. Can you make this an aspiration to reality and to ensure they act in accordance with Section 46 of the United Kingdom Internal Market Act 2020, which stresses the importance of facilitating the free flow of goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I certainly can do that, and as I said in answer to another right honourable gentleman from her party, we leave nothing off the table in order to make sure that we get that done, and there is unfettered access, NIGB and GBNI.
Let's head to Andrew Percy. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has been a good friend of East Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire, and he will be aware that the Humber is the biggest trading estuary in the country and contains the UK's biggest port. So can I encourage him, therefore, to look at the Humber freeport bid closely and also favourably, as it contains sites in Hull, Goole, Grimsby and the Scunthorpe Steelworks, which are really important for this region's future.
He's absolutely right, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend has mounted an excellent campaign, and the Chancellor, my honourable friend, the Chancellor, will be saying more about that a little shortly.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HS2 reduces journey times from Manchester Airport to London from 2 hours 24 minutes to 59 minutes. With the carbon capture that we would generate and the increased capacity to the West Coast main line, can I ask the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, what prevents governments from putting shovels in the ground in the north now?
Mr. Speaker, the answer to that is, as anybody knows who gets a project done on their home or wherever, if you start again midway through, I'm afraid you greatly multiply the cost, but we're going to go as fast as we possibly can.
Final question, Danny Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last time the UK hosted the G7 in 2013, the then Prime Minister launched the Social Impact Investment Task Force to catalyse a market for private capital seeking social outcomes as well as financial returns. And this country now leads the world in the development of financial innovations for public good. So will my right honourable friend confirm that the social investment tax relief, which was launched after that summit, will continue beyond April? And will he use this year's G7 to trumpet to the world the benefit of social investment, social enterprise and the social economy in general?
My honourable friend has long been a campaigner for the wonderful benefits of social enterprise. I visited some of his own, and if he just waits a little bit longer, he'll receive an update on social investment tax relief Mr. Speaker.
I'm suspending the House for 3 minutes to enable the necessary arrangements for the next business to be made. Order.